is not so much boring. I had a case of needing to manage a complicated environment. The reason why our environment is complicated is because of this. This is like a normal release flow. Developers develop and deploy to dev. QAs choose to deploy to QA. They choose when it gets advanced to staging product. But in our case, we're an AWS shop. So, and each of these environments is also an account. So they're totally separate accounts. So an SQSQ for an email, outgoing email, could be outgoing email in every account. Well, that means we have many multiple AWS accounts. Another cause is any artifact going through that pipeline to many multiple accounts is an immutable object. So if you build a container, you build it once, that container deploys to dev, that same container goes to test with whatever environment differences are indifferent in test. And also in the picture I have here, IAC infrastructure is also immutable. You define the infrastructure as a Terraform, and if you ask for a DynamoDB, that exact code goes to dev. That exact code builds the DynamoDB in test. So that's another layer of complexity. I don't have a picture for this one, but also usually you'll see Terraform done one of two ways. Either there's a monolithic Terraform that defines an environment. And so if you have a DynamoDB that you want to roll through that pipeline, you define it and put it in the dev environment, and then you copy paste it to QA. And therefore, and so some such. We have project-centered Terraforms, so each project has everything that silo needs in one set of IAC Terraform code, and that code is what builds out and goes from dev to QA with absolutely no changes, including account IDs or anything. All that's automated. And the biggest reason of complexity is this thing. When you have an EKS cluster, your authentication, your in-cluster RBAC authentication is mapped into your AWS IAM authentication with this friggin' config map. It's just AWS off. If you've done any EKS before, you've seen it. This section is, oops. This first section is built by EKS. It's what gives your nodes access to be a node. And you will, if you have done it, you will have added another section like this so you can actually manage your cluster from the AWS console instead of something else.
Quick question. Did you post these slides made like our Google?
Not yet, not yet, but I can. But that's pretty much the entirety of the slides. Is I wanted to go over why I had this complexity.
Okay.
And when you're dealing with Terraform, your Terraform state has to keep up. So if it was an environment state, everything going into the environment would have the same state file. But we have project IAC, so every project has a different state file. The cluster actually is part of a remote state for a cluster state, but for the project state adding an auth to it, you would have to write to that. You cannot write to a remote state. You can only write to your local state. So that caused a problem. You would, if you gave it the state file in it or let it, it would just wipe out your config map and screw your auth mapping. So there's a way to fix it. Everything in Kubernetes can be controlled by webhooks. This is the pipeline of how anything you create, like a deployment or a pod or a config map or a secret, you do it via kubectl or a manifest or a Helm chart. It doesn't matter. It goes to the Kubernetes API. And it inspects everything, and it gives everything an opportunity to break in. First opportunity right here is mutating admission control. If you set one of those up, it will call a webhook, and you can do anything you want. So that's what I did. Let's look at this. Those webhooks, if you look at some how-tos on the Googles, you'll find Golang pretty easily. See, can you actually read the code? This is just a basic webhook. Net HTTP, do a handle func in Golang. You'll find that pretty easily with Google. But I am the only person at my company that knows Go, so I could not do that. I had to choose Python because the other choice was Java, and that sure as hell ain't happening. So with a Flask, a webhook is even easier than it is in Go. Possibly readable.
But small and backwards.
Well, small, well, it's backwards for us, it's not for them.
Hey, Brian, do you not have access to internet?
No, it would not connect.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So I'll have to share some stuff.
Yeah, okay.
I'll go over how you build out and deploy the webhook, but the code is easy, so we can go over the code first. Close to go. Here we go. This is simplified code for this, which I'm thinking most people can't see anyway. But it's simple enough. A webhook comes in with some JSON. Fiddling. You can parse the JSON. Hold on, I'm scrolling the wrong way too.
This is just proof that Linux users will put up with any usability issue.
Well, this is rebuilt as of a few hours ago. So,
Can you increase the font size?
let me see.
Easy, Control plus, Control minus one.
Control Shift plus.
Maximize.
There you go. Beautiful. Somewhere. There you go. Where was I? So a hook, webhook, mutate, decode your request body, and parse it. First thing I do, my Terraform is creating a temporary AWS off update config map instead of AWS off. So it creates it, or it creates it. It does not really create it. It goes to the API with a creation, and the API sends it to this webhook. So here you go. I got this create for an AWS off update. So look, you cannot filter the mutating webhook definition. You have to filter it in your code. So all I care about is this one. So if I don't have that one, don't. 200, good. Let it happen. You can have whatever it was defined. But it is this one, so I can save that and then grab the current AWS off and parse it out, new role, and look for it. If this role is already in map roles, 200, good enough. Let it parse, and that's why it's happening. That's actually a bug. I need to fix that. And if it's not already in there, that means I have something to do. And this is the magic. We're actually replacing AWS auth. So I changed that JSON document that came in as a config map document. I changed that. I changed it to the new map roles with the new role from the update in, and I patched in what's happening. I changed it from a, where is it? I changed the name to AWS auth and changed the content of the map roles. And somewhere in here, I changed it to from a create to an update. So a creation for that update config map came in. I checked if it's something I deal with, then I turn that from a create of the update into a update of the correct one with everything parsed in and return 200. Since I've changed that create into an update, the one I want is updated, that create never happens. So magic trick happened. I had Terraform, just told Terraform create the update with one role you want, and I'll figure it out from there. And it's that freaking easy. Except it's not. That webhook has to be signed per role. So and it has to be SSL. So you have to get your CSR, CRTs, get it signed by the certificate in the cluster, put it into your pod that you're deploying to handle that webhook. Some other things that are a little, actually I can share the automation I have for doing that signing. Well, no, that's not it. First, it's a long rigmarole, but you gotta get that. And there's some other things I do. Like I do not build this into a container because I do not want it. Possibly I do. How do you join the Gypsy now?
I swear. Hope it
You.
I think it's one.
Live streaming is on.
I think you broke it.
I broke
It's connected. Claim disconnected. Oh, it is.
Yeah, I gotcha.
All right, let me see if I can find the Jitsi.
Live streaming is
There we go.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
There we go.
See my screen? Oh,
You're in the upper right. Or I see you on the stream, Brian.
Huh?
I see you on the stream.
okay.
So you just gotta share. There we go.
Victory!
That works.
That's pretty cool.
Which
This is the bash. I'll share that with you guys, but it's just a hack up of one of the how-tos you'll find with Golang. It's the search signing is pretty much almost stolen from there. I'll show you some of the things I do. Instead of doing a build and maintaining an image somewhere, this is different. I mean, it means my startup is slow, but, oh, where is it? Oh, here we go. My startup is slow, but you don't have to scale these. These are no load. So I just use the off-the-shelf Python image and build out, do a pip install, do a unicorn, and I'm good. That pip install takes a very long time compared to how you would want a pod to be starting up and shutting down, but you don't care about that with these. Some of the other things I had to deal with. This is the mutating webhook configuration for telling Kubernetes API that in this case here is a webhook I want you to call. And as I mentioned before, you can actually filter on a specific config map. Just I want big maps. This is default. You don't actually need a service account because it needs no writes. You just call the webhook and it parses and sends back data. It needs no writes to your Kubernetes API. But you do need a service so it can be found and deploy it. And here we go, config map. Put all the code, all the SSL into 2 config maps and load it for the deployment instead of building an image. That's just me because I don't want to manage. If there's a bug in Flask that needs fixing immediately, redeploy, bounce the containers, it's done. No builds, nothing necessary. What are some gotchas? I have a joke at the end of this as well. Since I didn't do the card trick, I got a joke for you. Let's see. I don't have a test cluster I can deploy it into and show you at work, but it doesn't really do a whole lot of work. It's simple as hell. It's also, this is how you would do Prometheus custom hooks for scaling. If you want to scale, like I've got to create one now to scale based on Java threads, you create a webhook. That's how you do it. Yeah, everything is a webhook. Either you're an API call to Kubernetes or Kubernetes is calling a webhook that you created. There is a whole lot I skipped over in that complexities that I could go over if you want to hear about, about how I do that. That same code creates AWS resources in multiple accounts depending on how it's being deployed.
Well, I tell you, does anyone have questions?
Yeah, give me questions, and then after questions, I'll tell you the joke.
Could you real quick go to the first slide?
The
Three
slides.
slides. That's just.
That's the slide. Pipeline.
I think it's very slow.
Yeah, it's back to the delay, but from last time, but it works. Just to give it a minute.
We're a financial company, so this pipeline was a deal breaker. I had to do this regardless. The immutable artifacts was not quite because they were doing bullshit before I got there, but I actually spent time in QA, and I don't believe in paying QA if you're not testing what you're going to deploy. So that's the immutable. Project not monolithic. We pretty much had to do that because we are rebuilding part of our platform right now, and it's only been going on a few months, and we've already got almost 100 microservices, and who knows how many DynamoDBs and SQSs and things like that. So it pretty much had to be project, not monolithic, and that fucking thing. And the different environment steps for IAC is managed by Atlantis. I have a custom Atlantis workflow that does the magic of figuring out which account to go to and doing that based on the environment we're going to. Good. Nice.
Any other questions?
With that many microservices, how do you test all that together? Yeah.
We have a bigger QA department than we have development and ops put together.
Oh, really?
Yes, but most of their jobs were finance, so dealing with lawyers.
But I guess what about like automated tests for everything together?
Yeah, automated tests. I'm not sure they're hitting the new web yet, but they are hitting a lot of the microservices and doing load testings already as well.
Do those QA members, do they have overlap where they test code, or they just, like, say John is exclusively for lawyer, or not lawyers, but for one group of.
South Carolina legal.
There you go. Yeah.
No, I think the legal bits, they all, I know one of the guys that's just starting in QA and he's bitching and moaning because it's so much business knowledge he has to learn because it's every state different, that kind of thing. So, and he is not one of the automation developers. Like QA, the unit testing and developer responsible for that. He should have automated unit tests that cover all of his code, but unit tests are not actually testing. There's also an automated test team that builds automated testing, including load testing. Here was working with them. And I'm not sure what the ones I have to deal with most of the time are. They're more, a normal software test QA team will be, they go through these interfaces, make sure it works, that kind of thing. That's another part of the QA team. So there are 3 parts of the QA team. And let me know when you're ready for the joke, because
Well, is anyone either here in this room or online have a question? Any other questions?
I have, so.
You build up the joke now though, so it's gotta
I
be
was gonna say,
good.
you better.
The joke is, where's Adam? The joke is, this is a test, a simple role and user, which is what we're doing. Each service account has one IAM role attached to it. There are multiple policies. If you're doing that, you don't actually need to do this bullshit. I just learned today. You only need the complexity of the AWS auth YAML if each of these things go into groups. And AWS doesn't tell you that. There was a bug and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and then what the hell? And I deleted everything from here except for these importance that you see here, the node roles and the system master, so you can actually use the UI. It made no difference because you're not actually using groups. You don't. And AWS does not tell you that. Every bit of AWS documentation says this AWS auth is how you map your RBAC to your IAM. But I learned something anyway, and this is what's necessary for the custom HPA metrics. This is how you do anything advanced in Kubernetes, other than create manifests and Helm charts and crap. This is how you do anything more advanced than that. Webhooks.
So like you're just taking that single IAM role and giving it the permissions to the specific Dynamo and the specific SQSs.
The developer that builds identity, which is in charge of logging in, finding out the user's information, address, everything to do with the user. He builds the IAC and Terraform, says I need Dynamo, not Terraform. We have good, he can use the module library. I want a Dynamo, I need SQS, I need this, I need the policies for SQS access, the policies for, and then I need this role with these policies mapped into RBAC. And it gets into RBAC, they have one for identity, so his identity business, his identity data, anything that does identity that needs access to the resources uses that IAM, actually uses that RBAC service account, which is mapped to the IAM role. But if you've done anything in EKS, you this AWS off because your AWS ALB ingress controller, you have to set it up in here, or Carpenter node scaling, you have to set it up in here, because except all of those are much more complicated than I learned today.
Before you arrived.
Yep. Yeah, what time is it? 4 hours ago. I learned that I did not need to do this. Except for, this is actually pretty cool. That was a cool thing to do.
File it away for later. You may need it for something else.
I thought pretty cool was turning a Kube API create into a Kube API update of an entirely different config map was a magic trick. Let's go back. Go Lang. But if you don't know Golang, if you want to learn anything in Kubernetes more advanced than Manifest, everything you learn is going to be in Golang. So yeah, I don't write Golang anymore, but you have to know it to learn from what you're given.
Kind of a mentality sort of thing.
I don't really like Golang.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I started with Golang at my last company. It was, what the fuck? I got a seg fault. Is this 1990?
So we got other questions?
No, I don't have anything, Jace.
Well, okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
When I share some stuff, PyCube is what I demoed here. That's just because it's much more readable. The Kubernetes team actually has a Kubernetes operator that is much more powerful, but it's hard to read.
So the PyCube is a simpler library, is it?
It's simpler to read things. Here is how I read in the current auth. 2 lines. Took 1 line to take the auth from the service account. Actually, yeah, you do need a service account because you have to be able to read the config maps to do what I'm doing. You don't for a normal webhook if you don't care about the current state. Oh, so on that, there's more than a mutating, there's also validating. If you've been applying your manifests, you probably have seen failed validation. That was a validation webhook that did that. Your Istio virtual service, you messed up. A validating webhook from Istio told you messed it up. And it's the same kind of thing.
Is it Jitsi, I guess, that's so slow? Or like your Jitsi's fine, or is it this?
Weird.
That's,
I don't know, because his is updating immediately.
So if we turn the camera off on this side for the room, would it update quicker?
maybe.
Like the little box that could, just chugging along, trying its best.
That's what a NUC or something.
What,
Your
Little computer up there, I don't think it's enough.
NUC or something.
this is actually a tiny Lenovo, it's an M90 tiny,
Oh,
behind the TV.
oh, okay.
It's like a i7.
Oh.
Yeah.
You don't need my camera.
Like how old of an i7? How old of an i7?
2 years maybe.
It's like saying I got a Ferrari, but it's from the 50s and doesn't run.
That's what the old one was.
Yeah, but it doesn't get you anywhere.
Well, I apologize for coming in late. There was traffic on the interstate, and I hate that I missed the beginning, so I came in lost. So I apologize. So anyone that really got a lot of good stuff out of it, can you summarize for me?
I think all you missed was why I had to do this, why I had to do a
Oh, okay.
webhook. But I had to, because we have multiple layers of complexity because we're a financial company and we have,
Well, let me go back to the start. What is it what's the problem you're solving here?
that's
I'm
the
sorry.
many complexities. We have, share it again, unless share's not keeping up, but AWS Shop, all of the, or you know anything in software development lifecycle. Developer builds something, it goes to dev, it's deployed, he tests it, it's cool. QA gets it goes to a QA environment, totally separate from what dev did in their sandbox, because you know what cats do in the sandbox.
Right.
They control their own and test it there, and then it can go to stage and it can go to prod. Well, in AWS, for us, those are all different accounts. So
Do you have a CI/CD then?
Yeah.
Okay.
CI/CD for the code, which is building out containers, which get deployed, as well as CI/CD for this is the infrastructure as code,
Mhm.
which is controlled by Atlantis.
Atlantis?
That really is nothing but a webhook handler for GitHub. So you create a PR in GitHub, it calls the webhook to Atlantis. Atlantis does the Terraform plan, the Terraform applies for you.
Okay.
And I created a custom Atlantis workflow that does very specific things to that Terraform plan, so they can figure out which account it's supposed to be going to based on where it is in the pipeline.
Okay.
So the fact that there's multiple accounts, immutable for artifacts, you build once, your IAC code never changes, you don't change it for different environments. If you deploy to dev, deploy to QA, do not change anything.
And they're identical.
Actually, QA gets deployed from the branch that's deployed to dev. So if it didn't go to dev correctly, you ain't going to QA. If QA has not tested it, you are not going to prod. And I have no image for that. You've done Terraform, a lot of the two options you'll probably be given is a monolith. This is how you set up this account, all the dynamos, all the SQSs in the dev account. And then you have a totally different Terraform for your QA. This is all this, and you copy the section of code that you're promoting, which sucks because you're copy pasting. So we don't do that. Ours is project-based, and the project goes through the pipeline to go through each. And Terraform, the problem is the shared resource, the cluster, is in a remote state file. So your project, when it updates its state, it says, I want this config map. Well, it can grab what's in the state, but it does what it wants and saves in its config map. And then the next one comes through, okay, cool. And it blows away what the last one did. That's where the problem came in, because of those 4 layers of complexity and the main complexity of this fucking thing, the way that config map works.
Guys, I'm sorry for having him repeat everything. I should have asked you later.
Yeah.
I was in the same traffic you were in, so
What's that?
I was in the same traffic, so I appreciate it.
But, okay.
Thank
you.
You will. And the main point is that webhook is mutating webhook, or a validating webhook, or a custom log aggregator, or a custom HPA scaler, or anything is a webhook. So learn Flask if you want to do Python, because that makes those freaking easy. And learn Golang if you want to learn what Google tells you.
What is Flask exactly?
It's web,
It's a web framework for Python.
very
It's
simple.
sort of based on one called Sinatra in the Ruby world.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So like Sinatra is a simple version of Rails, Flask is a simple version of Django or something. It's very simple only. Here's some routes, do this simple shit.
It's good for like APIs.
Yep. Our webhooks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or
Okay, that's what I've seen. Okay. I mean, I've heard the name obviously, but
Mhm.
I don't do web coding, so I don't.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I do webhooks though.
All right, well, anything else from anyone else about anything else? How's everybody doing? So glad so many people came tonight. And glad to see so many people online.
Hey, Jace, this is Ben. I got a question for the group. Have you all heard about the proposal to grab about 300 million more IP addresses from the IPv4 protocol standard? Well, yeah, it's a draft proposal to the Internet Engineering Task Force, and there's like 4 projects, and one of them is to say, hey, all the local hosts, all the IPs assigned to local hosts, which is about 65 million IPs, 127 dot something. Almost all of those are not being used because everybody just uses 127.0.0.1. And the proposal is to say, well, let's just reserve 65,000 for local hosts, and then use the rest for unicast regular internet IPs. So everything from 127.0.0.0 all the way up to 127.0.255.255 would be all local host if you needed it. If you needed 65,000 IP addresses for your local computer. But everything above that, like 127.1.0.0, would be and going all the way up to 127.255.255.255 would be all unicast regular internet that could be routable over the internet.
I had not heard that.
I hadn't heard that either, but that's.
Is Zach online? I'd love to hear Zach's take on this. 'Cause Zach is very gung ho on IPv6.
Yeah, I mean, let's extend IPv4, right?
Yeah, let's resurrect that zombie.
Zach would have a freaking heart attack.
Who's that? Joe McBurnett. He was on, as a friend of mine, he was on the Aaron board. Who helped write a lot of the original stuff. I've asked him about it because he'd been the other that way.
Hey, and bring him here.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, should.
Yeah, that'd be
Nice
great.
if he'll, yeah. He's interesting fellow.
Yeah, I bet. Wow.
And I'm sure someone's using that in a weird way and it's gonna break their stuff and they're gonna be angry, but
I'm just trying to think if I've ever seen something assigned, anything like a
Yeah, it's just
127.
127.0.0.1. That's
Well, the only one besides .1 is .53 that I've seen for DNS.
Okay.
Yes, and that was mentioned in the paper by the guy that's a proponent of this is named Seth Schoen, Schoen. And so he bundled this with like 3 other proposals. The bigger one is to take 268 million IP addresses that were originally signed to block E or everything above 240.
Yeah. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. Take all those and make those, publicly addressable also.
Who uses multicast, right?
I don't know. Is that what that block was for?
If I remember correctly.
I thought it was reserved for something else, like future use or something.
It is the future.
we're now in the future. We're out of IPs.
But then another one of his proposals was to say that the lowest address in a subnet, which is usually if your subnet was like 55.55 and it was a /16, it would be to take the lowest IP, which would be the .0.0, and make that a routable internet address, because the broad because that address essentially duplicates what the broadcast address is, and since BSD 4.3, the broadcast address has always been the highest IP address in a block. So it's always been, in my example, it would be 55, 55, 255, 255, and then the 0 just isn't used. So that was the third proposal. And I can't remember what the fourth one was, but so yeah, just allocating the last or that .0 from all the subnets that are out there would grab another 16 million addresses.
So how many more years of life support does that give IP4?
2.
3 months.
Yeah. I mean, and it was not warmly received at the IETF when the guy proposed it, when Seth proposed it 9 months
It's
ago.
clearly about money.
Yeah.
As expensive as IPs are, this is clearly about generating money for something or somebody somewhere.
Yeah. IP4 is already saturated by the usual standards.
Yeah.
And I think the 4 you're referring to is 0 refers to the within the subnetwork, refers to the local network. 1 nominally refers to the gateway of the local network. 255 is the broadcast, or all ones. So however many 255s it takes to make up the ones. And then 254 more recently started becoming the DNS server, or the DNS boot P, whatever other service is provided with the local network.
Right. Yep. That's that's all I heard last week that I thought was interesting, but I don't think it's going to pass. Because
You don't think it will?
No, I don't think it will, because while it was being presented at the IETF 9 months ago, that was recorded, by the way, and I can post it to the group later. But there's a couple problems with it. One, you're messing with a standard that's been there for 30 years. I think this was implemented in 1983. So whenever you change something like this,
40 years.
49.
yeah,
you're right.
So you're gonna have old Internet of Things devices that haven't been updated in 10 years, and they're gonna try to go to one. If you give them an internet address,
This
like
is just the internet having a midlife crisis. That's all this is. The internet's in its mid-40s. It's just a midlife crisis. We'll get through this.
I thought, didn't the DoD auction off a huge block like earlier this year? I thought, because they've been sitting on it was like some not insignificant chunk of the IP4 space, and I thought they sold it, but
Yeah, I think I heard something about that, but I don't know if they.
that should have given
Completed
us
it or-
another several years. You would have thought,
They do.
I
They
guess that's
have
probably all
10
about money.
The DoD has 10/8s that they're sitting on. A lot of which they're not using it at all.
they have 10/8.
/8s, yeah. It's like, and each one. So each /8 is 1/256 of the internet.
But I
So
thought 10
they're reserving
/8
like
in
12% of
RC
the internet.
1918, right?
Yeah.
10.
No, the quantity.
Oh,
10/8 networks.
okay.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
10/8.
Right, no, yes.
That doesn't seem like a good idea for them to use any of
The
those.
number of /8s they have is 10.
Yes, that's right.
It'd be /24, not 8. 1024 would be the 256th of the internet.
No. DoD has 10/8s. They have
8 is.
They have 1/8 network times 10.
Yes.
Yeah.
/8 is 16 million addresses. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Correct.
10 dot something, 11 dot something, 12 dot something. All the way up to.
And last week I learned that 198.51.100 something can be used in documentation because it's not a routable address. And I was changing documentation to, no, put 10 dot something, 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 for its documentation, don't put a real address. It's not a real address. It's a documentation address.
169 what?
195.
Testnet 2 is 198.51.10, and that's a /24. There's also Testnet 3, which you can use for documentation examples. That's 203.0.133 or 113, and then Testnet 1 is also for documentation examples. It's 192.0.2/24. So I was like, they look like the real addresses, but you can use them in examples and documentation, which is where I saw it. And I was like,
Just use numbers higher than 255 to start with.
yeah, but no, but that's in movies, right?
Right.
That's the 555 number, right?
Yeah.
And then you go
Yeah,
and you're like,
Route.
yeah, but you look at that, you're like, someone doesn't know how to write documentation. This one looks real, and it's.
I'd look at that and be like, somebody actually wrote documentation.
So,
When I went to college in the late 90s, they, talked about the IP4, but they kind of give us the warning that you got to learn this IP6 stuff because within
yeah.
5 years or so, the IP4 stuff won't even be used. That was in the late 90s.
Yeah.
If they'd have just moved faster.
I mean, you'd think with the world collapsing into like big cloud providers, and things like Kubernetes and more VMware, it's less common to just have your, web server hanging on a shingle directly exposed to the internet. So in theory, you may buy a whole lot fewer IPv4s and just, AWS load balancers and stuff, or the Kubernetes, Nginx, controller, ingresses.
Layer 7 for a lot of different things now. Some of it's going to AWS, some of it's going to on-prem, some of it's going to .NET bullshit, all based on path.
Yeah, just because you're a big,
You have ISPs though that have to deal with all the
new
developments that are coming in. Every single apartment that is being built is going to get a new IP address that they have to recycle or somehow provision.
Not to mention all the
Yeah, you have to
IoT
get
devices.
A home IP, you're like Charter, anybody around here, you're not getting one. They're gonna.
They should just do what the cell carriers do, just do the CGNet.
It looks to you like it's a routable address, but you will not get anything back.
Yeah, this is all internal subnetting and everything going
That's how
on.
my LTE connection is at home. I'm behind carrier grade net. Can't do squat with it. Got to punch out through VPN to do anything if I want anything to come back in.
Yeah.
Right.
Man, I'm at Charter. You can, the IP is dynamic, but you can, if you open up a port, you can connect to it through remote. And as long as you know that IP.
My computer crashed. No, it didn't.
Speaking of EKS, auto magic stuff, kind of like what he was talking about, I've always thought it's a little bit too much magic. They're doing a little too much and you don't get to inspect the daemon. But I've always thought it's cool when you use any of the SDKs, in your code that you're deploying to EKS cluster, the nodes that are in your cluster are running a IAM service on the 169 link local. And so the SDK will walk a tree of, do I have anything in a local config, environmental variables? If I don't see it there, I'm gonna look for a known file location. If not, it calls out to link local, talks to a daemon running on the node, and can assume that IAM role that it will negotiate with it. Unless you pod spec a different role onto it, but it's for that pod or that,
Or you actually should block IMDB2, whatever, because if you don't, then your containers can steal your node role.
Oh yeah.
That's not a good thing. I agree. You block that.
But then if you live under the corporate overlords, they'll let the AWS people sell them their security hub findings and then beat the developers with a stick until they turn it back on. So, you know.
It's easy. It makes it easy to be stupid.
Yeah, that's about it.
Ben, you got anything for next month?
I've been exploring a couple topics. One is the Jamstack, and another one is a tool called Ventoy that allows you to put a whole bunch of ISO files on a thumb drive, and then you can boot from any of the ISO files. So, are y'all interested in any of that? Jamstack is like it's a way to build web applications so that web apps are fast again, like they used to be. So, are y'all interested in any of that?
Is it just HTML3?
I don't know what HTML3 is.
The web when it was fast? Without JavaScript?
5?
If you're looking for topics, I've got a suggestion if somebody knows it.
Yeah, what's that, Robert?
And that is how to connect to public Wi-Fi's with Linux. Too many of them now seem to have individual sequences, splash screens, login mechanisms, and if there's any standards, I haven't been able to find them. For example, what I've seen, for instance, is seems to be common here in Winston-Salem, is it'll come up and say it needs a Spectrum login, but it's reported by others that those using Windows and Apple get in without being Spectrum customers. So they're apparently doing some kind of splash screen and guest entry algorithm, but I've never been able to find how it's done. Anybody know how those things have been developing in recent years?
I mean, captive portal software on different APs and stuff, it varies vendor to vendor. And I think you could probably change the captive portal based on like the user agent. But
okay, well, it sounds like you know what's going on. So would you like to do a presentation explaining that?
I could try and look into it, see if I can find out a little bit about how all that works.
Firefox has pretty good captive portal recognition.
Yeah.
So a lot of it depends on the browser you're using too.
It just usually pops up, connect, it pops up, I hit I agree to my firstborn child being sold off and I'm on the internet.